Charles, thanks for being with us today.
Oh, John, I appreciate you having me. It's always a pleasure.
It certainly is for me as well. Story out that we saw, I wanted to talk to you about and get your take on it. More El Pasoans getting concealed handgun licenses. That's the title of the story. But let's get into this a little bit. What's happening down here in El Paso from what you see?
Well, certainly there's a general increase, in fact, a huge increase in the number of Texans getting a Texas Concealed Handgun License, or what we commonly call a CHL. And El Paso is certainly kind of leading the charge at this point, as are other areas along the border. The violence from Mexico has a lot of folks worried. We know that there have been some spillover into Texas already. The NRA at our annual meeting and the extravaganza had a focus on a Texas rancher who was murdered by someone trying to come in illegally. The real irony is he was murdered by a man that he helped. Apparently this fellow was dying of thirst. He helped him and he was murdered. So whenever that kind of stuff really gets all over the media, people tend to head to their CHL instructors in much larger numbers.
So, and it's kind of a natural thing. We saw this, Charles, in Texas and in other states around the country when people feel threatened or feel personally threatened, or they feel their rights or freedoms are being threatened. Sometimes they are motivated and they act. I was referring specifically to when President Obama came into office. There was this surge in purchasing of firearms and gun ownership. It was heck, he was the best unintentioned salesperson that the firearms industry could have had. But that kind of we can't look at that anymore. This is a whole different phenomenon with CHL licenses happening in Texas, and it looks like not just in El Paso but in Texas in general. I'm sure the other border states we can trace, as you're saying, to the situation on the border.
You're absolutely right, especially the comments about the Obama factor. I mean, we've all those folks are involved in shooting or gun ownership or whatever, certainly saw the spike in gun sales and ammo sales. They saw an increase in the price of guns. And as all of us know, all of a sudden, seemed like a matter of weeks, the shelves were bare at most of the places that folks bought ammunition. That tended to die off a little bit. I mean, the effect of that tended to die off a little bit. But, pardon me, we also saw that same increase in the number of folks wanting to get a Texas CHL. As that demand kind of backed off a little bit after over a year, we started seeing a spike again, and the spike coincided with all the news reports about the violence in Mexico, and again, the murders of some Texans along the border by illegal aliens. Whether they were connected with the drug cartel or not is unknown at this point. But you're absolutely right. Whenever folks are threatened, be it because of an increase in crime or something personal to them and their lives and their family, that's a natural thing to do.
And now, you're not right on the border, and you're in Houston, but you're in Texas, and you're down there in the heart of it. So, Charles, tell us here in the rest of the country, how bad is it down there? How bad is it from your personal experience, and just how bad is it the way it's affecting people down there with the situation on the border?
Well, the situation on the border, as you say, is a long way from us here in Houston. My office is in downtown Houston, and we certainly don't see the numbers. We don't see the reports that you do on the news about problems that they're having in El Paso or some along the ranch lands. But what is happening, for example, is there's a tragic case where a 14-year-old girl was murdered in a robbery. If you can imagine what in the world a 14-year-old child would have that would be worth a hijacker even attacking her, much less killing her.
Right.
Well, turns out the trigger man in that deal was someone who was illegally here, been deported twice before, and the family, understandably, is enraged. And that all over the news helps to drive the demand for concealed handgun licenses up here as well. I think if I may have to stand corrected, but I want to say that the last 4 Houston police officers killed in the line of duty, other than by car accident, were killed by people that are here illegally, including 2 who were previously deported 1 or more times. So all of that, it drives people to thinking, okay, how do I protect myself? How do I protect my family? And I know as an attorney, I'm asked this question quite frequently. Should I get a handgun license or not? that's a personal decision that I really can't advise someone. But what I do tell folks is to look at it this way. It is an option. If you get the license, it doesn't mean you have to carry a gun, but it gives you an option you would not otherwise have if you feel the need arises. Either arises daily or because of certain areas that you're going to have to travel. And I think that message is hitting home with a lot of folks.
And the sad part about the situation with the border, Charles, and you mentioned the outstanding video that the NRA produced about the situation on the border. The anti-gun people are trying to turn this around and say this whole problem is stemming from firearms that are coming from the United States and from gun shows and yada yada yada. They're pouring across the border. What's this 80% number they were throwing around, which by the way isn't true, and nobody can prove it. It was just a number they grabbed, and of course a lot of the media who are anti-gun pick up on these numbers and perpetuate them. But the real truth is the legal gun ownership in America across the border in Texas, in Arizona, makes it so just what you said, so people can defend themselves when they feel threatened. We have the right, the freedom, thanks to the Second Amendment, to defend ourselves legally and lawfully against these bad guys who may be coming across the border.
Exactly, and you're unfortunately accurate in your description of the news media reporting on the supposed gun running down into Mexico. And you're right; they were throwing around ridiculous percentage, 80% of guns. But the small print, if you will, was 80% or pick your percentage of the number of guns traced. Well, what they didn't tell you is that the number of guns traced were less than 4% of those that were actually confiscated.
So doing the math, and I'm not a math, 80% of 4%. We're not talking 80%. We're talking about what, about a percent or two?
Oh, exactly. And what's ignored in those reports, because of a political bias and a political goal, what's ignored is the fact that most of the guns that folks would see on the evening news that were collected were belt-fed machine guns. They were rocket launchers. They were M79 grenade launchers. I mean, it's all this kind of stuff that you can't legally buy here anyway.
Right, that people are getting from arms dealers, and they're coming from Central and South America, other countries, from arms dealers, not from gun shows. You can't go to a gun show in Texas or Arizona and buy a rocket launcher, or you can buy, the only way you can buy a fully automatic is with it's been well federally regulated since what, 1934, I think. The way you can buy them, it's very heavily regulated, and you just can't go into a gun show and buy one.
No, that's not. And I mean, it's one thing to disagree on a political issue. I mean, I'm 60 years old. I disagree with folks on political issues, but it's quite another to be so intellectually dishonest, especially when it hits a person's safety. So while the anti-gun groups would try to push for various types of gun control, anything from the so-called assault weapons ban to repeal of concealed handgun license laws, in spite of the fact that they've been hugely successful in every state that has adopted them, that's what they're trying to do. And the truth is, it's not going to affect the drug cartels. They're getting guns from deserters in their own military. They're getting them through South America, as you said. A lot of them are coming from China. But the push with the gun control advocates would be to disarm honest citizens and leave them absolutely incapable of protecting themselves. And if you need this, a very close example of what that brings us, we can look to Mexico. I heard on the news last week they had lost over 24,000 people murdered because of the drug cartels in something like the last 14 months. I mean, that's what gun control gets you.
That's scary stuff. Very quickly, before I let you go, Charles, tell us what's happening, what's coming up on the horizon with legislation in Texas.
Well, as you're aware, John, our legislature meets every 2 years for 4 months in odd years. And the only thing I can say with absolute confidence is that we will again be pushing for an employer parking lot bill, the employee security bill, so that employers cannot, at a whim, leave their employees completely defenseless, driving to and from work, sometimes over great distances and sometimes with their children while they're dropping them off at school or daycare. And we're certainly going to push for the campus security bill that will allow adult college students that have a Texas concealed handgun license to defend themselves on campus, so that we do not see a repeat of a Virginia Tech-style massacre in Texas.
Wow, that's great news. Thank you for letting us know, and we'll stay in touch with you about that. And thanks for all your hard work down there for Second Amendment and gun owners down in the great state of Texas. Charles Cotton, NRA board member and attorney in Houston, thanks for being with us here on NRA News.